I'll call meeting of their audit committee to order. Ask Ms. Hopper to take the roll.
David Miller.
Here.
Margaret Brown.
Here.
Frank Racino for Fiona Moss.
Present.
Lisa Middleton.
Present.
Lisa Middleton.
Present.
Thank you. Jason Perez.
Here.
Shonda Wesley.
Present.
Lynn Paquin for Betty Yee.
Present.
Thank you.
Okay, good to see everybody here, and we'll move on. Item 2, approval of the April 21st, 2020 Risk and Audit Committee timed agenda.
Move approval. Ms. Brown.
Moved by Ms. Brown. I have a second.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Middleton. Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. Ms. Hopper, if you would.
Margaret Brown.
Aye.
Frank Racino for Fiona Moss.
Aye.
Lisa Middleton.
Aye.
Jason Perez.
Aye.
Shonda Wesley.
Aye.
Lynn Paquin for Betty Yee.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the executive report. I'll call on Marlene Timberlake Adamo.
Thank you. Apologies, there is apparently some background noise in my office. I think it's the air conditioner / heater overhead. So from time to time, they're going to mute me, and it might just take a second for them to take me off mute so that we don't mess up any of your audio. So good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee and board. Marlene Timberlake Diadamo, CalPERS team member. It has only been 2 months since we've been together, but the world has changed quite dramatically since then. Being as though this is the Risk and Audit Committee, I would be remiss not to acknowledge the circumstances that we are living through and the challenges and risks we currently face. I would like to take the opportunity, like many of my colleagues have done, to acknowledge the tremendous work and effort by CalPERS team members to make sure that our business continues unabated and that our team members and members are safe. Today, we are bringing 2 action items to this committee. Both are each is the compliance plan, the annual plan, and the annual risk and audit plan, or I'm sorry, the annual enterprise risk management plan. These plans are for fiscal year 2020, 2021, and they are action items. In addition, I would like to take the opportunity to update this committee on our two summary of committee direction items that were discussed at at each of the February and November Risk and Audit Committee meetings. So at this point, I'll stop and see if there's any questions on anything other than the summary of committee directions, and then I'll go into those 2.
Okay, no, I'm not seeing any requests.
Okay. So the first item was the audit threshold materiality. And if you remember at the November 2019 committee meeting when the independent auditors were here, there was a discussion around the best practices for determining audit materiality and thresholds. And at that time, as part of the discussion, it was suggested that the committee chair and vice chair go back and meet with the independent auditors to discuss what they consider materiality and how they determine materiality as part of the audit. This has been done. This was done in March, and I am happy to report that I believe that the vice chair and chair, they can of course speak for themselves, or satisfied with the discussion that had ensued. And maybe at this point, I'll just stop and see if anyone had any questions.
I'm not seeing any questions and I'm not seeing anyone waving, so we'll move along then. Thank you.
Okay, great. The next item was an item that was discussed at the February Risk and Audit Committee, which was the last time we were together. And this question was raised by Ms. Brown, and it was around the QSR, the quarterly status report that the Office of Audit Services provides. And at the time, the question really was around if there was an ability to get more detail about those reports. And the discussion at that time was quite brief. And so what I wanted to do, since at this point, the QSR is actually not scheduled to come before this committee until June. So we wanted to take the opportunity to maybe have a little bit more of a discussion, maybe a clarification around the question, given that the audit resolution policy was not discussed at that time. And so what is the audit resolution policy? The audit resolution policy is a board policy. It's been in effect since 1994, last revised in 2016. And what it does is it basically dictates the roles and responsibilities of the chief auditor, management, and the reporting that goes to the Risk and Audit Committee. And so really what I wanted to point out with respect to the audit resolution policy is that the policy requires the chief auditor to notify management of audit items that are outstanding for more than 6 months. And the policy itself requires that open internal audit findings are closed within 12 months. And if there is a open audit internal finding that is open beyond 12 months, it would be the chief auditor that would bring that information back to this committee to review. So I just wanted to make sure that the committee understood that this was out there and that this is a policy that's being utilized. At the time, in February, there were no open audit items that were outstanding for more than 12 months. And at this time, there are no open audit findings that are open for more than 12 months. So the question is given the information about the existence of the audit policy and how it operates, is the detail still necessary or needed with respect to the quarterly status report that is being provided by the Office of Audit Services?
Yeah, this is got a couple questions here, it looks like, and I just also wanted to kind of chime in before I go to that. And we had a really detailed discussion with staff and also with our auditors about these issues and the whole process for prioritizing things, addressing audit items, and bringing them back and reporting and the cycle to get things back in front of us if it's not resolved in the 12 months is really the focus of this question. It seems to be well explained. Almost anything we can think of that would come up is addressed, part of what the audit team does. So I was pretty satisfied that kind of reporting is working well for us. We haven't run into problems. That was so I've got a request for Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was and has continues to be my issue for providing oversight by this committee. The concern I have is a lot of I don't even know how much this committee or the full board, as a matter of that fact, is looking at the specific audit findings. You actually would have to go into diligence, go into other items, you have to go a bunch of places just to find the audit reports and then to find the audit findings. What happens, Ms. Timberlake Diadamo, as you know, those QSRs, just a little bar chart. It's just a little chart. and it just says 6 outstanding findings less than a year and 5 outstanding findings more than 12 months or whatever it says. And that's it. That's all we get. And I don't think that's adequate oversight because I don't know which findings have not been resolved. I have no way of knowing from the little bar chart. And so I was thinking, and this is what I think I expressed to Ms. Chapui, that it would be nice to have like a little table that just said, it's the finding from this report, it's still outstanding, and we expect it to be resolved. You can say you expect to be resolved within a year or not resolved. The problem is there's all these outstanding findings out there that we have no idea which ones have not been resolved. And that's my concern. And there have been some more than a year that I don't recall the chief auditor or whoever's supposed to bring it back to us. And I'll have to go back and check the records if you'd like me to, but we can just look at those QSRs and we'll see that they're not necessarily brought back to us. And not just the internal audits, which would need to remain confidential because those are confidential, but also the ones with our outside agencies where you have quite a few hanging out. I don't think it would be that difficult to put together a little table of those outstanding findings, almost like Ms. Chapui did when I asked for additional information on, I can't remember the audit specifically, but there was 15 agencies that had other issues outside of what the audit report was for, but I would have to have read 167 pages or 176 pages to find out what the 15 agencies were that had other issues that weren't part of that audit report. So again, I just think it would be helpful to have a little table that we could go through so we would know what are the findings that are outstanding and when do we expect them to be resolved. Otherwise, I don't think it's real oversight. Thank you.
I don't see any other questions. And one of the things I would add as well is that if we have been having issues with outstanding items not being resolved timely and not being reported back to us, I think we would certainly be aware of that. And I certainly am not aware of that being a problem historically, and I'm not aware of anything that would cause me to think that we had a problem with these not being prioritized and worked on and addressed by our team in an efficient and effective manner that would cause me to be concerned. So if there is anything that would cause that kind of concern, I'd certainly like to know about it. If you, Ms. Braun, or anyone else has any specific examples. Otherwise, I'm kind of reluctant to create additional reporting and rather than just let the team continue to address them, prioritize them, and deal with them, and report them back to us if there's something that does get resolved within the time frame that cause the reporting back.
Without the chart, how would you know if there wasn't anything substantial outstanding? You wouldn't.
You would know when it didn't get completed at the end.
How would you know? They give you a little bar graph. It doesn't tell you what it is. It's a little blue chart, a little orange thing. It doesn't tell you what it is.
Marlene, could you explain the process or have Belize come into the call to explain this process so we can get that onto the record?
Is Belize on? Jerry?
Yes. Believe, go ahead and try your video and your audio,
Yes,
please.
I'm here. So the process of how we resolve the audit findings or how we validate it, is that the question, just to clarify?
Ms. Chapui, it's how would the board know if management had committed to resolving an audit item, which of course we do, but what's the process by which the board would be notified if management did not complete what they said they would do?
Through the quarterly status reports, we would be providing that information. And audit resolution policy, as Marlene stated, says that the findings will be resolved within the 12 months. And we monitor those throughout the year. Once the report goes final, the clock starts ticking for 12 months. And most of the divisions and the audit liaisons are aware of the timelines. And when they provide us the response, the corrective action, which becomes part of the final report, they tell us what actions they're going to take to resolve the finding and the estimated timeline for that. And when they complete those findings, they provide us the documentation to the audit services. And auditors validate the information they provide. Sometimes we do follow up to require for additional information for us to validate the information they provided. And then we resolve it, we validate it, and we close the finding. And the status, the bar charts that you're seeing, the numbers are pretty much corresponding to those. And like Marlene said, there's no internal audit findings that are older than a year. Does that answer the question?
Yep, I think so. I've got a question from Ms. Middleton.
Actually, Ms. Frost asked the question that I was going to ask, but this would be a follow-up question for Ms. Timberlake, Ms. Chipui. Are you satisfied, and what actions have you been taking to ensure that the most serious of issues that you identify are being addressed in a prompt manner?
So Belize, if you want to start and then I'll add to it.
Sure. So the process also throughout the 12-month period, we do report, Office of Audit Services reports the status of the open findings once they hit the 6-month mark in accordance with our audit resolution policy. And we bring this detailed information to the executive team's attention during the IAC meetings, which is our Integrated Assurance Risk Management Council. All the executive team members are there. It's pretty much brings it to their attention to say, dear executive, there's this finding of your division. It has hit the 6-month mark. Heads up, we're in the second half of the 12-month year mark. Please provide some attention and direction and guidance to your team members to resolve it. So it does get their attention. And that's one of the control functions we have to communicate to them on a continuous, on a timely basis. And that's one of the reasons that those findings get resolved on a timely basis. In addition to that, Ms. Frost also has implemented some more strict controls in addition to beyond our audit resolution policy, where now she's requiring the executive team to ensure the divisions resolve the findings, especially the ones that are severe. Now we have the rating factor also implemented in the audit report. So those findings with severe ratings are required to be resolved within 90 days, which is shorter than the period.
And actually, Belize said what I was going to say about the severity levels, that being a new process that's been implemented where audit findings are required to be closed within 90 days. And through the Integrated Assurance Risk Council, which is our risk meeting, we monitor those findings, and that report comes to that committee on a monthly basis.
Thank you.
Back to you, Ms. Brown. You're muted.
Microphone, I got it. I'm looking at, I think, the last QSR. Was that from November? Is that the last one we got?
February.
February? Oh, I don't know what date this is. So the one I'm looking at has 2 outstanding items more than a year old. Those are on the financial statements. Hopefully everyone's reading the financial statements. Let me see what that's. And so I don't know what those items are unless I asked you specifically what they were. Those are my concerns. Or maybe it's just the severe ones. The severe, they're like low, medium. What are the new terms we're using for them? In terms of
severity level?
Risk. Yeah, tell me what that is.
The severity rating? Yes, high, low. We rate them high, medium, low. The findings.
So Belize, can I just ask you to add one thing? Ms. Brown said that the financial statement audits, that they weren't in the February, but they are in a separate attachment, correct, as part of the QSR?
That's correct. There is details to them. I don't have it in front of me, but you're right. The details are there.
So Ms. Brown, the QSR contains internal audits as a separate attachment, the public agency, or it has information about the internal audits, the public agency audits, and the financial statement audits, but there is a separate attachment. I don't know if it was 2 or 3 that was actually provided as part of the February agenda item that had the details of the financial statement audits. So what I was speaking to earlier was the internal, I'll call them the internal regular audits that is done by Belize's group.
Right, so I'm looking at, so I found it for the February numbers you gave us as of December 31, which spurred this whole conversation where the committee agreed that we would have you do this. So I'm looking at the employer compliance, and there are 52 outstanding items more than 1 to 2 years old, 1 to 2 years old. I have no idea what those outstanding items are. Those are certainly public information. And the only way for me to find out would be to ask you for every single one. So I'd be happy to do that at every single board meeting if that's the way we want to work it, or just get a table. Just a table.
So, this is Marcy. I think, Marlene, taking Ms. Brown's comments around the exceptions beyond the year timeframe, that would make sense to give more detail, because then those are the audit items that are outside of the policy range. So what kind of detail could be provided to the committee?
So the question is, what kind of detail could be provided to the committee for audit items outstanding more than 1 year?
Correct.
So, I guess this is probably more pointed towards Belize, but the question is, can we, for the public agency items, and Belize, please correct me if you think I'm wrong, but for the public agency items, I think it probably would be doable because they are public agency and they're out there. It would be a function of Belize and her team providing a report or pulling that information together, maybe even changing their QSR in some fashion to include that information. And then for the internal, which is I think more of the question, it would be, what would that look like given that the internal audits are confidential? And so it might be where we would, if there were audit items that were outstanding more than a year, which would be in violation of the audit resolution policy, that information could be brought into a session that, where that could be discussed. Thinking.
I think that's a great idea. I believe I tried to say at the last board meeting where this was discussed that I understood that if it was internal, it would need to be done in closed session. But you must have a way of tracking the items over 1 year old. You must have a table because you showed me that they're 52. So it'd be I don't want the big report. I'm sure you just got a little line item that you could grab and to give to us. I just want to know what are the outstanding items and that we can take a look at. And I'm also concerned about the severe ones. I did talk to Ms. Frost last Wednesday about a risk and not an item, and we agreed that it was low, but it still had concerns for me. But the risk was low. So, and I think that's helpful that you have those criteria on there. It's helpful so that I don't freak out when I see a bunch of findings and you tell me they're low. So that is helpful. But I'm concerned about severe, less than a year, and then I'm concerned about anything over a year. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see. Is there another question, Margaret, or is that it for you? Okay, I'm not seeing question. So I think looking forward, we could look at what we could provide in terms of any report, additional detail on things that are beyond the policy requirements. In terms of detailed report, we do that in closed. We come back to us with a suggestion for an approach to that. Dean, I think that would be from the chair.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part. You were breaking up a little bit.
Oh, so yeah, so if you could come back with an approach to that or report on any of those in a more detailed fashion.
Sure, thank you. And I appreciate us having this conversation because as I stated, the last time this was discussed, it was a bit quick. And I really wanted to make sure that we looked at what we're asking for against the backdrop of the audit resolution policy and that everyone understood sort of what we were doing. So I do appreciate this conversation.
Yeah, and I think doing that on the exception basis when things are outside of policy and not creating a new layer of additional, more frequent reporting is the way to go. So good conversation.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see where we are here. Yeah, I think, does that wrap it up
David?
for that item?
Yes, we're on item 4A, action consent items.
So I haven't seen any request to pull anything from the action consent item number 4. So that includes approval of the Risk and Audit Committee minutes and the External Audit Services request for proposal. So I would entertain a motion. Moved by Ms. Brown. Seconded by Ms. Middleton.
Could we have a discussion?
Sure. I'll call on you, Ms. Brown.
Thank you. I just have a question about the RFP for external audit services talks about forming a subcommittee in order to do that interview and recommend finalists. I would like to be considered for that subcommittee. Thank you.
Thank you. And there are no other discussion. I will call for the question. I will note that Mr. Perez had to step away for a call, so he will not be voting on this. But otherwise, I'll call for the question.
Hey, Mr. Chair, Margaret Brown,
Aye.
Frank Racino for Fiona Ma,
Aye.
Lisa Middleton,
Aye.
Jason Perez,
Aye.
Shonda Wesley,
Aye.
Lynn Paquin for Betty Yee,
Aye.
and Mr. Chair, just to confirm, it was Margaret Brown who moved and Lisa Middleton who seconded.
That's correct. And I was glad to see Mr. Perez made it back in time to vote.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Item 5 is information consent items. Again, I haven't seen any request to pull any of those items. I don't see anyone waving frantically to get my attention. So I would entertain a motion to move them.
So move.
There's no motion required on this.
Oh, it's information. Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, moving on to item 6, action agenda items. 6A, enterprise compliance plan. Adamo.
Yes, hi, good afternoon again. This item is our annual plan. For those of you who've been on the committee for some time, this should be familiar because this is the way that enterprise compliance has its opportunity to bring to you our plan for the upcoming fiscal year. This is an action plan, as Mr. Miller stated. We bring this document to you in a format that we hope is easier on the eyes. In years past, it was presented as a rather large document, and we have taken the direction to really try to simplify the document and really make the information a bit more concise. It is a bit different from our previous presentations in that we've integrated our strategic plan deliverables and into our annual plan. And that's why you see references to the strategic objectives and the measures as part of the plan. And actually, I don't see the document up, but if we can share it, that would be good. So what I'll also then talk about, thank you, is for the benefit of those members who are relatively new to the committee and or the board, I'll provide a brief synopsis of the 5-year plan, which is coming to a close in June. So in June, as in 2 months from now, we will have completed our 5-year plan. In 2015, Enterprise Compliance brought a 5-year plan to this committee with the intention of developing and maturing the overall compliance program. This was primarily brought to you over the years as a stair-step slide that you would see with a lot of detail around the items that the compliance team would be working on as board-approved items. In the first 2 years of this plan, we've sort of tracked it against the elements of an effective compliance program, which was a bit subjective. And in the last 3 years, we've moved to benchmarking the maturity of our plan, which is why you would see the reference in our strategic measure to a 2+ or a 3+ in terms of the benchmark maturity. What we did in this past year is we maintained a score of 3, and our goal is to have a 3+ by fiscal year 21-22. And that is one of our initiatives for our strategic plan. In previous plans, our program has focused on governance, policies and delegations, ethics, training, operational processes, mandatory training, reporting, compliance risk assessments, compliance operations, and communications and education. This year, we intend to build upon and to continue to develop our functions with a strong focus on addressing and mitigating risks. In our plan, we will be focusing on identifying and managing compliance and third-party risks. We'll also be focusing on measuring the effectiveness of compliance training. And so this document is the plan. And what I'd like to speak to, if you could scroll down just a little bit, it's a 1-page document, is in our objective. Our first objective is we're focusing on 3 areas within the broad measure of conflicts of interest. Those areas are Form 700 operations, Statement of Incompatible Activities, and the Conflicts of Interest Code. For objective number 2, this is our third-party risk item. If you scroll down a little bit, it would be visible. Here, third-party risks continue to be a high concern for organizations. While partners in many respects, third parties also bring risks in the form of reputational, operational, and security, to just name a few. The initiatives that we have identified and are working on help us to identify and manage third-party risks within our vendor universe. And then the last objective, objective 3, is around compliance training effectiveness. Training is an extremely important element of a compliance program. Measuring the effectiveness of compliance training is the way that we measure the continued and long-standing impact of training on the behaviors of our team members. And so this is a synopsis of our plan, and I would be happy to take any questions if there are any at this time.
I'm not seeing any new question requests. So,
Okay, well, thank you. And then, oh, well, that's your job to move to the next item.
okay.
Mr. Chair, we need to take a roll call vote. This is
Oh,
the
I'm sorry.
item.
So I will need a motion to approve.
So move.
Moved by Ms. Middleton, seconded by
Frank,
Frank Ruffino. Okay, and so I'll call for the question. Ms. Hopper, if you would take the call.
Margaret Brown,
I think I'm going to abstain. I'm not sure what we're really voting on. I don't know how I lost that.
okay, Margaret Brown abstained. Frank Ruffino for Fiona Ma,
aye.
Lisa Middleton,
Aye.
Jason Perez,
Aye.
Shonda Wesley,
Aye.
Lynn Paquin for Betty Yee,
Aye.
and Mr. Chair, I have Lisa Middleton moved and Frank Ruffino for Fiona Ma as a second.
That's correct.
Can I change my vote to an aye? I just went back and read the item. Thank you.
So again, Margaret Brown changes her vote from abstain to aye.
That is correct.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, the ayes have it, so we will move on to action agenda item 6B, the Enterprise Risk Management Plan. And I'll call on Mr. Forrest Grimes for this.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee members, members of the board, Forrest Grimes, CalPERS team. In item 6B, I will present the fiscal year 2021 Enterprise Risk Management Plan for the committee's review and approval. The plan is comprised of the following work streams, and I'd like to start on page 36 of your board books, which is the next page. Next slide, please. So the first work stream is to facilitate the Asset Liability Management Advisory Committee to help the board make decisions throughout the ALM cycle, with the Chief Risk Officer acting as chair, and that happens to be me, so I'm the chair of that committee. The members include the CEO, the CFO, who oversees financial soundness of the system and really facilitates all of the program areas in that cause. The Chief Actuary and Actuarial Office, the CIO and the Investment Office, the Communications and Stakeholder Relations Deputy Executive Officer, and Leadership, and the Legal Office as an advisor. And that really is how the committee is made up. If we could go to page 7, next slide, please. I see a question, Mr. Chair.
Yes, we have a question from Ms. Brown about the committee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So Forrest, my question is, we talk about this, do we call it the ALMAC? Is that what you call it?
We do, we call it the ALMAC.
Great. So I know we have a lot of these internal committees, and I know like the investment team does, they have the RAIC and that, but we typically on the board don't know what those committees are and who they consist of. I think it would be helpful for us to know, because I didn't know about the ALMAC until you're telling me. So it might be helpful to know about all the internal committees we have and who sits on those.
Of course, this is up to leadership. Most of these higher level committees do have a charter, and you get reported out on the activities of these committees. In this particular case, many times throughout the ALM cycle, both in the investment office, the investment committee setting, as well as the finance and admin committee setting. So there's many activities that are work streams within these committees, much like the committees that you have formed for governance within the board. And basically, staff is really doing a lot of work behind the scenes so that you can, in essence, be presented with informative information, and then you can, in turn, make decisions and instruct us how you would like to proceed. So these are really functional working group kind of committees. I think that it's kind of, from my perspective, it would be kind of in the weeds for, to have any board participation in.
Oh, no, I just want to know who's on these committees, how many there are and who's on them. Don't want to participate, for heaven's sake.
Certainly. I can, it's up to, again, the executive team, but there are charters for these committees which lay out the membership and activities and responsibilities.
Sure, I just don't think it's some of the standard org charts we get when we get orientation. It might be helpful to know what committees there are, and we find out about them as we stumble across decisions by staff. So it'd be helpful to know what are these subcommittees and who sits on them. Thank you.
Okay, we'll certainly get back to you on that point, and your point is well taken. Thank you.
Back to you, Mr. Grimes.
Okay, we'll go to the next page, page 30. We're on the right page. I'm sorry. So this is where we're going to identify, assess, and monitor risk. And this year we want to mature the risk management program by embedding emerging risk into the framework, which is really one of the last things that we have to do in terms of creating a very nice risk management framework. You will be seeing that in the June committee meeting. We're working on it now. We will complete the 2020 risk assessment and present results to the Risk and Audit Committee in November, as we traditionally have done. And we're going to more fully integrate risk management into strategic planning, working in collaboration with the enterprise strategy and performance division, that team. So I think that will be a nice maturity process as well. If we could please turn to page 38, board books, which is the next page. We will enhance the internal control framework, and here we're going to be mapping program level cross-functional processes, taking a consultative approach as needed. We will advance operational risk reporting by developing a joint reporting platform with the information security and the enterprise compliance teams. And we will enhance risk functions by continuing to use the intranet, training, and the annual survey to cultivate a risk intelligent organization. We will additionally enhance enterprise data governance by leading enterprise data management business plan initiatives. Those are cross-functional, that's a cross-functional group as well. And we will complete the State Leadership Accountability Act reporting implementation plans that are due in June and December respectively. And if we could go to page 39, please, next page. Finally, we will be evaluating the CalPERS insurance portfolio to verify adequate coverage exists for current risk transfer strategies. The full plan is presented on pages 40 through 42 of your board books in much more detail than this presentation. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'm going to stop, turn it back to you, and see if there are any questions. Mr. Chair, I think you're on mute at this point.
Did that do it?
That sure did.
Okay. So I'm not seeing any additional requests to speak. And so we'll go forward. And this is an action item. And so I would entertain a motion to approve the plan as presented here.
Move approval.
Moved by, I can't see.
Brown.
Oh,
Brown.
Ms. Brown, okay, and a second,
I'll second.
Oh. Seconded by Mr. Perez.
Sorry, Lynn.
Oh, that's okay.
He's quick. Okay, so hearing no further discussion, I will call for the question. Ms. Hopper, could you take the tally?
Margaret Brown,
Aye.
Frank Ruffino for Fiona Ma,
Aye.
Lisa Middleton,
Aye.
Jason Perez,
Aye.
Shonda Wesley,
Aye.
Lynn Paquin for Betty Yee.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, I have Margaret Brown moving the item and Jason Perez seconding it.
Okay, the ayes have it. The motion passes. We'll move on to item 7A, summary of committee direction. Back to you, Ms. Diadamo. Oh, you still be muted there. Nope.
There we go.
Sometimes it takes
Okay.
more than one click, I see.
Yes, I was hoping someone could read my lips. So for a summary of committee direction, I have posted the discussion that we had on the QSR, an exception report for additional detail to provide information for the open audit findings that are beyond the policy procedures. And I have that, I think we'll work with Ms. Brown to make sure that we get the information that she's looking for with respect to that topic.
Yeah, I think also we're gonna have some further information about committee makeup and structures.
I didn't get to that yet, but okay.
Okay, sorry.
What I had written down and I'm looking at as committee direction would be information on what are the committees and who sits on them.
That's, I don't think, anything there, so, okay. So I don't have any indication of, public comment, and I don't see anyone asking to speak, so.
No public comment, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so, without objection, I would call this, adjourned, and we will move into closed session. Let's see, in say 10 minutes, so 4:26 to finish.
And just, this is Marcy, just a reminder that everyone will be off the call other than, sorry, maybe Marlene can say this since my speaker seems to be
Sure.
not functioning.
So what we're going to do is we're going to have everyone leave the session except for me and the audit committee. And I'm sorry, Pam will take roll, and then she'll leave, and then we'll conduct the committee, and then I'll leave, and then Belize will come in. And then when Belize leaves, Forrest will come in. And then we will not go back to open after close, which is our typical practice.
Okay, so just to
Marlene,
be
this is
clear. And then
Marlene and
we'll come
Mr.
to
Chair,
you.
this is Pam.
Yeah.
Being that we're going into close, you'll have to exit this meeting and go into the closed session, new meeting.
Oh, I wasn't aware that there was one that was set up.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna clarify. So we will close out of this, Pam, and then open the closed session, and then move along as Marlene described. Okay, is that clear? Everyone got it?
Okay. I'm just looking to see if there's been a closed session that's been set up for
Yeah, there is.
when it was earlier today. Okay.
Okay, well, hopefully we'll see you all in 10 minutes in closed session.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.